You won't believe what happened when our overzealous HOA president decided to bulldoze my disabled sister's wheelchair ramp, thinking she could get away with it. But what this entitled woman didn't know was that my sister wasn't just any resident. She was the governor of our state. And this would be the biggest mistake of Karen's HOA career. It all started with a bright yellow violation notice taped to our front door, our fifth one this month. The HOA claimed that my sister Sarah's wheelchair ramp violated community guidelines, despite us following every legal procedure to install it. Sarah, exhausted from her new job, gave a tired smile as she rolled up the ramp. She never complained, not about work, the accident that put her in a wheelchair, or even Karen's harassment. We had every permit in place, hired licensed contractors, and even painted the ramp the exact shade required by the HOA. But Karen, the power-hungry HOA president, was relentless. What started as passive-aggressive fines soon escalated into something much worse. One morning, I overheard Karen talking to men in suits about bringing in a bulldozer. That's when I knew. This was war. The next morning, I woke up with a bad feeling in my gut. As I stepped outside to help Sarah into her car, I noticed Karen standing in her yard with two men in suits. She was gesturing wildly at our ramp, flipping through a thick stack of papers, while one of the men scribbled notes in a leather-bound notebook. The other held up his phone, snapping pictures of our home like it was some kind of crime scene. "I don't like this," I muttered to Sarah, gripping her wheelchair handles a little tighter. "We'll handle it the right way," Sarah replied, ever the calm and collected leader. But I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling growing in my chest. As soon as she left, I checked our security cameras and scoured our files for anything that could protect us. That's when I found something horrifying. Buried beneath all the violation notices was a document claiming our ramp had been marked for removal, signed off by someone who wasn't us. The panic truly set in when I heard Karen's voice drift across the lawn. "Yes, we'll need that bulldozer here first thing tomorrow. The board has already approved the removal." A bulldozer? My hands shook as I hit record on my phone, capturing every word. "This is war," I muttered, my mind already racing for a plan. Morning came too quickly. The sound of heavy machinery outside yanked me out of a restless sleep. My spoon clattered against my cereal bowl as I bolted to the window. My heart nearly stopped. A massive yellow bulldozer rumbled in our driveway, its blade gleaming in the early morning sun. Two workers in orange vests were setting up bright yellow cones, carefully measuring the ramp, and in the middle of it all stood Karen, dressed in her signature red blazer, clutching a stack of papers like they were holy scriptures. I stormed outside, phone in hand, already live streaming. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Karen turned, flashing me that infuriatingly smug smile. "Oh, good. You're here. I have an emergency order from the HOA board. This structure is in direct violation of community guidelines and will be removed immediately." She waved a document in my face, but yanked it back before I could grab it. "That's a lie," I shot back. "We submitted all the proper paperwork. We have city approval." Karen scoffed. "The city isn't the HOA, dear. This ramp is an eyesore, and it's lowering our property values. I'm simply maintaining community standards." The bulldozer roared to life. I had seconds to act. And then I saw something on my phone that made my blood run cold. A text from Sarah's security team. "Stay calm. Help is 3 minutes out." The bulldozer's metal treads crunched against our driveway as the operator adjusted his controls. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried, one last time, to talk sense into Karen. "You can't do this. It's illegal," I yelled, stepping between the machine and the ramp. Karen just smirked, crossing her arms. We sent a certified notice weeks ago. You didn't object, so that counts as approval. I stared at the paper she waved, my pulse racing. The signature wasn't mine. It wasn't Sarah's either. Someone had forged our consent. "This is fraud," I shouted. "And you're trespassing on an active demolition site," Karen shot back. "Move, or I'll have security remove you." I clenched my fists, but before I could say another word, I heard it. The distant wail of sirens. Then, the first black SUV turned onto our street. Karen's smirk wavered. Another SUV, then another. Then 3 state police cruisers, their red and blue lights flashing. The neighborhood, once silent, exploded with whispers. Curtains were yanked open. Doors creaked. People stepped out onto their lawns, eyes wide with curiosity. The lead SUV's door swung open. A suited man stepped out first, scanning the area. Then, with a smooth and practiced movement, he turned and opened the back door. And there she was. Sarah. Wearing her official governor's blazer, her sternest expression on display, she rolled out in her wheelchair like a general arriving on the battlefield. Karen took a step back. "Actually, Mrs. Thompson," Sarah's voice rang clear over the stunned crowd, "this is no longer just a neighborhood matter. The moment you violated federal disability laws, this became a state issue." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even the construction workers froze. Karen opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Sarah wheeled forward, her security team flanking her like a protective wall. "And not only did you demolish my property without legal cause, but you also destroyed a structure classified as state property under an accessibility initiative. That's a felony, Karen." A man in a dark suit stepped forward. "Mrs. Thompson, we have some questions regarding your HOA's legal status and financial records." The blood drained from Karen's face. Behind her, her board members were already backing away, pretending they had nothing to do with this. The lead investigator flipped through his notes. "We've also received complaints about discriminatory practices under your leadership. Would you care to explain those?" Karen's mouth opened and closed. Then the bulldozer operator, bless his heart, finally spoke up. "Wait, you mean I just tore down the governor's ramp?" I almost laughed, but Karen wasn't laughing. She was sweating, and for the first time ever, she had nothing to say. Karen stood frozen, her usually smug expression twisting into one of sheer disbelief. The bulldozer operator had killed the engine, his hands gripping the controls like he was trying to disappear. The construction crew exchanged nervous glances, realizing they might have just committed a serious crime. Sarah, calm and composed, turned to the lead investigator. "Please make sure Mrs. Thompson is fully informed of her rights." The investigator nodded. "Mrs. Thompson, we'll need you to come with us to answer some questions about your actions today." Karen finally found her voice. "This is ridiculous. I was just enforcing HOA rules. I have every right—" Sarah cut her off. "You had every right to enforce rules within the law. What you did today was criminal. Destroying a disabled person's access to their home. That's a federal violation, Karen." Murmurs spread through the growing crowd of neighbors. Some were recording on their phones. Others were shaking their heads. And then one voice rang out. "Mr. Rodriguez, our elderly neighbor. It's about time someone held her accountable." That's when it all came pouring out. Mrs. Chen from across the street stepped forward. "Karen forced me to remove my medical garden last year. She said my therapy plants were an eyesore." Mr. Rodriguez nodded. She fined me $500 for installing a wheelchair lift for my father, who was a veteran. More and more neighbors spoke up. Stories of outrageous fines, discriminatory policies, and years of unchecked abuse. It wasn't just about our ramp anymore. Karen had been ruling the neighborhood like a dictator. And now, her empire was crumbling. Sarah's assistant stepped forward, holding a thick binder. "Governor, as per your request, we reviewed this HOA's financials. Mrs. Thompson has been misusing HOA funds for personal home renovations. In the last 3 years alone, over $40,000 has been siphoned into undocumented community projects." The gasps from the crowd grew louder. Karen's face drained of color. "That's not true," she stammered, but nobody was listening. 2 state investigators stepped forward. "Mrs. Thompson, we have some serious concerns regarding these financial discrepancies. We need you to come with us." Karen tried to protest, but it was over. As the officers escorted her toward the waiting car, she clutched her beloved HOA rulebook like it was a life raft. I turned to Sarah, who watched the scene with quiet satisfaction. "What now?" I asked. She smiled, a glint of determination in her eyes. "Now, we fix this neighborhood." And with that, everything changed. The morning after Karen's arrest, I woke up to chaos. Our security footage had gone viral overnight. News vans lined our street, cameras flashing. The story of the HOA dictator versus the governor had captured the nation's attention. Sarah didn't waste time. By noon, she stood on our front lawn, right in front of the bulldozed remains of her ramp, giving a press conference. "This is bigger than just my home. It's about every American's right to live with dignity. Too many HOAs abuse their power, targeting families, the elderly, and disabled individuals. That ends today." She held up a thick stack of papers. "I'm introducing new legislation to protect homeowners from HOA overreach. We're calling it the Right to Home Happiness Act." The crowd erupted in cheers, but the real victory wasn't in the headlines. It was in our neighbors. People who had never spoken to each other before started sharing their stories. Elderly residents who had been bullied into silence finally found their voices. The neighborhood, once divided by fear, was coming together. That afternoon, something incredible happened. The Wilsons, a family that had been too scared to speak out before, stepped onto their lawn holding a sign, "Support accessible housing." Then, the Bakers put up their own sign, "HOAs should help, not hurt." Within an hour, every yard on the block had a sign, except for one, Karen's house. She was gone. Her reign of terror finally over. And in her place, a new HOA board was forming, one dedicated to fairness, community, and support. The violations office? It was turned into a community help center. Instead of sending out fines, they sent welcome baskets to new residents. As for Sarah's ramp, it was rebuilt, but better. Local artists volunteered to paint it with beautiful floral designs. At night, soft LED lights made it glow, turning it into a neighborhood landmark. For the first time in a long time, our community felt like home. And the best part? The construction company that had been tricked into bulldozing the ramp apologized. Their CEO personally visited Sarah and announced a new program, free ramp installations for disabled residents across the state. As the sun set on that unforgettable day, Sarah turned to me with a smile. "We're just getting started." And looking at how much had already changed, I believed her. With Karen gone and the new HOA board in place, our neighborhood underwent a complete transformation. For the first time in years, people weren't afraid of receiving ridiculous violation notices in the mail. Instead of worrying about the color of their front doors or the height of their grass, families could actually enjoy their homes. The community that Karen had ruled through fear was now becoming something better, something stronger. Sarah didn't just move on after winning this battle. She made it her mission to ensure that no one else would have to go through what we did. She hosted town hall meetings right in our backyard, educating people about their housing rights. She brought in disability rights advocates, legal experts, and community organizers to help other neighborhoods stand up to abusive HOAs. And as word spread, more and more people started coming forward with their own horror stories. One elderly couple revealed that they had been fined thousands of dollars for installing handrails on their front steps. Another man shared how his HOA had forced him to remove a wheelchair lift for his disabled wife. Sarah listened to every single one of them. She didn't just fight for herself, she fought for everyone. And then came the moment that changed everything. A famous YouTube lawyer, Tommy Chin, who specialized in exposing corrupt HOAs, reached out to us. He flew in to meet Sarah, offering to take our case pro bono. His video about Karen's abuses went viral overnight, racking up millions of views. With Tommy's help, we launched a massive lawsuit against Karen and the HOA board members who had enabled her. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial fraud, discrimination, destruction of property, and multiple violations of federal disability laws. The case didn't just get national attention, it got political attention. Lawmakers took notice. Sarah's proposed Right to Home Happiness Act gained widespread support, and within months, it passed through the state legislature with overwhelming approval. The new law made it illegal for HOAs to override federal disability protections, impose discriminatory fines, or misuse homeowner funds. It also set up a Homeowner Protection Office, a new government agency dedicated to holding HOAs accountable. And guess who was offered the job of running it? Mr. The day I got the offer letter was surreal. 1 year ago, I had been fighting to save my sister's wheelchair ramp. Now I was being asked to help protect homeowners across the entire state. "You should take it," Sarah said, smiling. "We didn't just change our neighborhood. We started something bigger." She was right. This wasn't just about one corrupt HOA president anymore. This was about standing up for people who had been silenced for too long. And I wasn't going to let that momentum go to waste. A year after Karen's downfall, I stood on our front lawn, watching as our neighbors gathered for a community barbecue. Children laughed as they played in the street, something they never would have done before, for fear of Karen's endless rules about noise violations. Elderly residents sat comfortably on their porches, chatting with friends. The tension that had once choked our neighborhood was gone, and in the center of it all stood Sarah's ramp. It was no longer just a wheelchair ramp. It was a symbol of resilience. Local artists had painted beautiful murals on its sides, flowers, stars, and even a quote from Sarah's speech at the press conference. "A community is not built on rules. It is built on people helping each other." At night, soft LED lights made it glow, turning it into the most beautiful feature on our street. Instead of being an eyesore, it was now the heart of our community. Even more shocking, the construction company that had bulldozed it had completely turned itself around. They now offered free ramp installations for disabled residents across the state. Their CEO personally apologized to Sarah and even set up a scholarship fund for students studying disability rights law. The new HOA board was nothing like Karen's dictatorship. Instead of fines and threats, they focused on making the neighborhood better for everyone. They created a volunteer program to help elderly homeowners with repairs. They held monthly community meetings where people actually got a say in decisions. And the best part? Karen's house, which had sat empty for months, was finally sold. A young family moved in, a couple with 3 kids, 2 dogs, and an elderly grandmother. And guess what they built in their front yard? A wheelchair ramp. Nobody complained. Instead, 5 neighbors showed up to help them unpack. As I stood there watching the neighborhood thrive, I realized something profound. We hadn't just fought back against an unfair HOA. We had changed minds. Sarah rolled up next to me, her eyes scanning the happy scene before us. "So," she said, smirking, "what's next?" I grinned. "Oh, I have a few ideas, because this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning." The biggest lesson I learned from this fight is that bullies only win when people stay silent. For years, Karen ruled our neighborhood through fear. She fined people, intimidated families, and convinced everyone that they had no choice but to follow her rules. But the moment one person stood up to her, everything changed. Sarah didn't use her power as governor to get special treatment. She used it to expose injustice and help others. Because of her, laws were changed, homeowners were protected, and an entire community was transformed. And that's the real victory. It wasn't about getting revenge on Karen. It was about building something better in her place. The next time you see something unfair, don't stay silent. Speak up. Because change doesn't happen on its own. People make it happen. And sometimes, it all starts with one wheelchair ramp. If you loved this story, hit like and subscribe for more crazy HOA and Karen stories. Have you ever dealt with an unfair HOA? Share your experience in the comments below.